Story title: Between Two Moons. She was the thing wolves feared and the thing they craved, half human, half wolf, wanted by neither, claimed by the most dangerous alpha alive. And she was done running. Chapter 1: The Half-Blood Returns. The wolves smelled her before she crossed the border. Naya Solis knew this the way she knew most things about the wolf world, through her skin, through the specific prickle at the back of her neck that had never belonged to the human half of her. She felt their attention like a shift in barometric pressure, that collective awareness of a pack turning its nose towards something unfamiliar, something that didn't belong in the neat categories wolves lived by. Something like her. She crossed the border stone at midnight anyway. Ironvale territory stretched before her in every direction, 300 miles of old-growth forest, ancient packland, the kind of place where the trees remembered things humans had forgotten. She had grown up hearing stories about Ironvale the way other children heard fairy tales, except in her case, the stories came from a wolf mother who said them like warnings, and a human father who said them like prayers, and neither of them had agreed on a single detail except this: Ironvale was not a place you went unless you were invited, pack-born, or desperate. Naya was none of those things. She was something worse. She was the reason the Ironvale Alpha had sent 2 of his wolves to her door in Verith City 3 days ago, with a message folded in black paper and sealed with a print of a wolf's paw in dark wax. The message had 4 words: "Come home, half-blood." She had stared at those words for a long time. She had thought about the decade she'd spent building a life in Verith City on sheer stubbornness, the apartment she'd furnished herself, the medical practice she'd built on the human side of the city where nobody knew what she was, the careful, ordinary life she'd constructed around the fact that she was too wolf for the human world and too human for the wolf one. She had thought about every door that was closed in her face, every pack that had turned her away, every wolf who had looked at her mixed blood like it was a contamination. Then she had packed a bag and driven 8 hours north. Not because she was obedient, not because she believed the word home applied to a place she'd never been, because something in that message had pulled at the wolf half of her like a hook in deep water. And she was done pretending it hadn't. The forest received her without ceremony, no welcoming party, no hostility yet, just the particular silence of a place that was paying close attention. She walked the path the wolves had given her, a hand-drawn map on the back of the black paper, and she kept her breathing even and her pace steady, and she did not let herself feel anything about the fact that for the first time in 28 years, the ground under her feet felt like it recognized her. She made it 2 miles before he stepped out of the trees. He came from her right, out of shadow so complete she had no warning, and Naya's warnings were better than most humans, better than many wolves. He simply appeared, as if the dark had been holding him in reserve and decided now was the moment to spend him. He was the largest person she had ever seen. Not just height, though he had that, the kind that made the trees around him seem normal-sized and everything else seem scaled wrong. He was built like the forest itself, dense, layered, immovable, the kind of mass that came from something more fundamental than training. Dark skin, deep and rich as ancient bark, amber eyes that caught no external light because they were generating their own, pure wolf gold burning in the dark. His jaw was set. His expression was not hostile exactly. It was something more complete than hostile. It was the expression of a man who had already made every decision that mattered and was simply observing the results arriving.
He looked at her the way no one had ever looked at her, like she was exactly what he'd been waiting for, like that was a problem. "Naya Solis," he said. His voice was low, deliberate, the kind that didn't need volume because it was already everywhere. "I know who you are," she said. "Then you know why I called you." She held his gaze. The amber eyes were doing something to her pulse that she was going to have to address later, privately, and with significant irritation directed at her own biology. "Your message said 4 words. They didn't explain much." "No," he agreed. He stepped back from the tree line onto the path and gestured for her to walk. It was not a request. "I'll explain everything, but not here." "Why not here?" He looked at her steadily. "Because what I have to tell you will change the rest of your life, and you deserve walls around you when you hear it." She walked.
Chapter 2. What Her Blood Meant. The Iron Vale estate was not a house. It was an argument made of stone and timber, sprawling and layered and built over centuries by people who intended to stay. It sat at the center of the territory like a declaration. We are here. We have always been here. We will be here when you are gone. Riven brought her through a side entrance, which she appreciated, not the grand front door, not a performance. A kitchen entrance, warm light, the smell of wood smoke and food, and a woman at the table who looked up when they entered with the expression of someone who had been waiting and was now running an assessment so fast it was almost invisible. "Marin," Riven said, "this is Naya." "I know who she is," the woman said. She was somewhere between 40 and ageless, silver threading her dark hair, the contained energy of a wolf who had decided somewhere along the way that she was done performing anything for anyone. She studied Naya with amber eyes, pack gold, pure wolf, and then something happened that had never happened to Naya in a room full of wolves. The woman stood up and bowed her head. Not deeply, just a fraction, the particular angle that Naya had seen wolves use for alpha acknowledgement. "Marin is my beta," Riven said, watching Naya's face. "She's done this since the day I told her what I found in the archives. I've told her not to," she continues. "I bow to what's true," Marin said simply, and sat back down. "Sit, girl. You look like you drove 8 hours on anger and caffeine." 9 hours, Naya said. There was construction. She sat. Riven sat across from her. The kitchen was warm, and Naya's wolf half was doing something involuntary and embarrassing, settling, relaxing, the way it had never once done in Verith City or any of the human spaces she'd spent her life inhabiting. She pressed it down. "The archives," she said. "Tell me." Riven's amber eyes were steady across the table. 30 years ago, a wolf named Dale Solis left Ironvale Pack. He left because the council at the time had ruled against half-blood members. He left with a human woman named Claire. He left with a secret he never told her, never told their daughter, and died 8 years ago without telling anyone. Naya was very still. "Dale Solis was my father," she said. "Yes," Riven said, "and Dale Solis was the direct bloodline heir of the Ironvale founding pack, which makes you—" "Don't," she said. The word came out sharp, a reflex. "The last surviving blood heir of this territory," he finished, "regardless of what you want that to mean." Silence. Naya looked at the table, at her own hands, the scar across her left palm from the shift she'd accidentally made at 16 that her mother had tried so desperately to explain away, at the fingers that were slightly longer than they should be, the build that was slightly broader, the reflexes that had always been half a second faster than any human around her. "My whole life," she said carefully, "I have been nobody. In the human world, I'm the strange one, the one who heals too fast and sees too well in the dark and can't quite pass. In the wolf world, I'm rejected at the gate because I'm mixed blood and therefore lesser and not worth the complication." She looked up. "And now you're telling me I'm heir to one of the oldest pack territories in the north." "Yes," Riven said.
Why does this sound like a trap? Marin made a sound that was almost a laugh. It's not a trap. It's a complication. The Iron Veil Council, what's left of it, has been pushing me toward a territorial merger with the Valdris Pack for 2 years. Valdris is larger, aggressive, and their alpha is the kind of man who counts everything he acquires. If I merge, Iron Veil stops being Iron Veil. The land, the history, the 400 wolves who were born here, they become Valdris property. And if you don't merge, then I need a stronger legal claim to the territory than my own alpha line. Under old pack law, he paused, a founding bloodline heir outranks an acquired alpha claim. You existing here, recognized by this pack, changes the legal architecture entirely. Naya stared at him. You need me as a political shield, she said flatly. I need you as what you are, he said, and his voice had shifted, something underneath the measured delivery, something that sounded less like strategy and more like something he hadn't planned to reveal. What you are is more than a legal claim, Naya. What you are is, the pack has been waiting for you. I don't know how else to say that. The wolves here, the oldest ones, they've been restless for 2 years, and I couldn't explain it. Since I sent that message, since you crossed the border tonight. He stopped. What? She said. They've gone quiet. The restlessness is gone. Naya sat with that for a moment. I haven't agreed to anything, she said. I know, he said. I don't know these wolves. I don't know this land. I have a life in Verith City. I know, he said again. Then why do you look like you've already decided how this ends? She said. The amber eyes held hers across the table. Because I have been running this territory alone for 11 years, and the moment you walked through that door, something in my wolf went completely still for the first time in 11 years, and I have learned not to argue with my wolf about the things that matter. The kitchen was very quiet. Marin stood up and went to make tea with the deliberate tact of someone removing themselves from a moment. Naya looked at Riven Ashcroft across the old wooden table and felt the hook and deep water pull again, harder this time, and she thought, I am in so much trouble.
Chapter 4. What the Alpha Wouldn't Say. He found her at the eastern boundary on the 3rd day. She'd been walking the territory every morning before the pack was fully awake, learning it the way her wolf half demanded, physically, through the soles of her feet and the information her senses pulled from the air. The land was extraordinary, ancient and layered and alive in a way she had no human language for, the kind of place that had been loved and protected for so long it had developed something like personality. She heard him coming. Of course she did. Her hearing was not quite pack level, but it was close, and Riven moved with a controlled quietness that told her he was not trying to surprise her. He came to stand beside her at the boundary stone, the old marker, twice her height, covered in moss and lichen, and older than the town nearest to them. My father stood here, she said. It wasn't a question. His name is in the record stone, Riven said. He put his hand on the marker, a gesture she realized was unconscious, the automatic touch of an alpha on his territory's markers, checking a frequency. 3rd generation from the founding. His leaving was recorded as a loss. The council that expelled him dissolved. The wolves who enforced that ruling are gone. Iron Veil's laws changed 40 years ago. Half-blood members are full members. He paused. It was too late for your father. He'd already built a life. He never told my mother what he was, Naya said. She found out when I was 12, when I started changing. A pause. That must have been terrifying for both of you. My mother, Naya said carefully, is the most adaptable person I've ever met. She was terrified for approximately 3 days. Then she researched everything she could find, found a wolf contact who could explain the biology, and spent the next 6 years making sure I could control it. She paused. She's also furious at my father for keeping it from her. She has been for 16 years, and the fact that he's dead has not diminished this in any measurable way. Something happened at the corner of Riven's mouth. that almost shift she'd cataloged twice already, the expression that his face made when something caught him off guard in a way he hadn't prepared a mask for. "She sounds remarkable," he said. "She's coming here next month," Naya said, and watched his expression. "I called her this morning. She said she'd been waiting 30 years for someone to explain what happened to my father." "I'll tell her everything I know," he said, without hesitation. That surprised her. She'd expected complication, politics, pack privacy, the usual wolf world habit of keeping its secrets to itself, not simple, immediate commitment. "Why did you call me home?" Naya asked, the real question, underneath the archives and the legal claims, the real reason. He was quiet for a long moment. The forest around them was doing its morning thing. Birds, distant movement, the specific soft light of early sun through old canopy. He looked at the territory, and she could see the weight of it on him. 300 miles of land and 400 lives, the cost of carrying something that large. "I told you about the fated bond the first night," he said. "You told me your wolf went still," she said. "That's not a full answer." "No," he agreed. He turned to face her. The amber eyes in morning light were something she was going to need to develop a tolerance for. They were too direct, too present, too much. A fated mate bond is not something wolves choose. It's not romantic in the human sense of the word. It's not infatuation or projection or comfort. He stopped, chose different words. It's recognition. The wolf recognizes its other half at a biological and spiritual level that doesn't ask for your opinion. "And you think I know you are," he said, with a flatness that was not arrogance, but certainty, and the difference was significant. "I have known since you crossed the border. I knew from the first description of your bloodline in the archive, before I'd seen your face." He held her gaze. "I'm telling you this not because I want to pressure you. I'm telling you because you asked for the truth, and I will not lie to you. Not about this." Naya looked at him. She thought about her 28 years of half-belonging, the human world that was always slightly wrong, and the wolf world that had always turned its face away. She thought about the territorial politics and the legal claim, and the 6 half-blood wolves in a pack of 400 who had never been quite fully welcomed. She thought about the border stone and the feeling of the universe exhaling. "The bond goes both ways," she said, "if it's real." "Yes," he said. "Meaning my wolf recognized me," he said quietly. "The moment you saw me on the path, I watched it happen." She hated that he was right. She hated the accuracy of it, the precision, the way he'd seen through her composure to the thing she'd been working very hard not to examine. "I'm not easy," she said, because she needed him to understand the full weight of what he was claiming. "I am 28 years of being told I'm not enough, and I have built something very hard around that, and I do not dismantle it for anyone." "I know," he said. "I have a life that is not here. I know. And I am furious about the fact that I have been on this territory for 3 days, and it already feels more like home than anywhere I have ever lived. I am furious about that." "I know," he said again, and this time there was something in it, something warm underneath the steadiness, something that said, "Me too." She turned back to the boundary stone, put her own hand on it, felt the land through it in a way that had no rational explanation and needed none. "Tell me about Valdres. Tell me everything." Chapter 5. The Enemy Has a Face. Valdres Alpha came on the 5th bay. His name was Corin, and he arrived with 12 wolves and the particular confidence that came from never having been told no by anyone who had the power to make it stick. He was large, not Riven scale, but large, with pale eyes and a practiced charm of a man who had learned that a smile was a tool and used it exactly that way. He arrived at the gate and looked at Naya first. She was standing in the courtyard because Riven had said she didn't have to be there, and her wolf had decided that was exactly why she should be.
She stood with Marin and two of the senior pack members, and she addressed with the particular deliberateness of a woman who understood that clothes were communication, dark and clean and entirely unbothered. Corin's pale eyes ran across her with an assessment she recognized, the calculation of a man determining whether something was an obstacle or an asset. "The half-blood heir," he said. His voice was pleasant. "I'm Naya Solis, and you are on Ironvale land." Something shifted in his pleasant expression. Nobody had spoken to him like that in long enough that he'd forgotten to prepare for it. "Indeed," he said, and moved past her towards Riven, and she let him because that was the correct tactical choice, not because she was intimidated, and she caught Marin's sidewise glance that confirmed she'd read it right. The meeting was held in the council room. Naya attended. Nobody told her she couldn't. Corin laid out his merger terms with the practiced fluency of someone who had written and rewritten this speech. Ironvale would fold into Valdra's territory. The Ironvale wolves would be absorbed with full respect for existing rankings, which everyone in the room understood to mean nothing of the kind, and the land would become Valdra's land. "The council has indicated support for a transition," Corin said, with a glance towards 3 of the 7 elders who had the specific body language of people who had already been spoken to privately. "The council advises," Erin said. "It doesn't decide." Under old pack law, Naya said, and the room's attention shifted to her with a completeness she felt like a physical weight. "A founding bloodline heir holds territorial veto over any treaty that would extinguish the founding line's claim." She held Corin's pale gaze. Silence. She had spent 2 days reading Ironvale's archived legal documents with the focused intensity of a woman who had been medical researching for 6 years and knew how to process dense information quickly. Sable brought her tea and asked questions, and the other half-blood wolves had drifted in and out, listening. Corin looked at Riven. "An interesting interpretation," he said pleasantly. "It's not an interpretation," Naya said. "It's the text." "The bloodline claim requires pack recognition," Corin said, shifting. "A half-blood who has never been pack." "Whose recognition counts," Erin said, and his voice had taken on the particular quality he'd heard once before. Not loud, just complete. "Because I recognize her, and I am the Ironvale Alpha." The room was very still. Corin looked between them. His pleasant expression had gone somewhere beneath the surface, where it was probably considerably less pleasant. "I see," he said. "This merger is not happening," Erin said. "Not today, not through council pressure, not through any mechanism you've prepared. Ironvale stands as it is. You're welcome to stay for the evening as our guest. If you'd prefer to leave tonight, we'll escort you to the border." Corin stood. "This isn't finished," he said. "No," Erin agreed. "It isn't." After Corin left the room, choosing dinner, which told Naya he was buying time to recalibrate, Erin looked at Naya across the long table. The council members were...
Chapter 6. The Night the Bond Broke Open. Corin left in the morning. He left with the specific smile of a man who had not conceded, merely paused, and his 12 wolves behind him carried the collective energy of a promise unmade and therefore still dangerous. Naya watched them go from the upper window and felt the pack around her exhale. Then Sable appeared at her door with the other half-blood wolves, Tam, Dex, Ren, Lyra, and small, fierce Kala, who was only 14 and had a stare that could stop weather, and they spent the morning in the east sitting room doing something that was not quite a pack meeting and not quite a family breakfast, and was, Naya realized slowly, something she had no word for because she had never had it before: belonging. Not the performed kind, not the desperate negotiated kind she'd spend her life trying to cobble together from scraps. The quiet, unremarkable, entirely natural kind. The kind where Tam could hand her a cup of tea without asking how she took it because he'd noticed 3 mornings ago and remembered, and where Calla could lean against her arm while she read without either of them acknowledging it, and where nobody in the room required her to be less than what she was or more than what she was. She excused herself at noon because she needed to be alone with what was happening to her internal landscape. She went to the eastern meadow. She sat in the tall grass and she let herself feel it, all of it, the things she'd been managing and containing and keeping at arm's length since she crossed the border. The land, the pack, the half-blood children who had looked at her like she was proof that there was somewhere they could be whole. And Riven. She sat with Riven last because he was the most significant and the most dangerous to examine honestly. The fated bond. She knew what it was. Her mother's wolf contact had explained it years ago, in theory, as something that happened to other wolves, relevant to Naya only academically, because who would bond a half-blood? The recognition, the pull, the biological and spiritual certainty that this specific person was built to be your person, in the same way that your lungs were built to take oxygen. She had been fighting it for 5 days, and she was exhausted, and the wolf half of her was deeply unimpressed with the effort. She heard him cross the meadow. She didn't turn around. "The pack says you've been out here for 2 hours," he said. "The pack has opinions," she said. He came to sit beside her in the grass, not close enough to crowd, close enough that she was aware of every inch of the distance between them. "Corin will come back," he said, with a different approach. "I know. He'll try to discredit my bloodline claim. He'll argue the half-blood inheritance isn't valid under current law, even if it was under the Accords. He'll look for procedural grounds." She paused. "We need to get the pack recognition formalized, publicly, on record. It removes the ambiguity." "That would require a formal ceremony, a claiming, before the full pack," Riven said. She turned to look at him. "A claiming," she repeated. His amber eyes were very direct. "It's not what you're thinking," he said. "It's not a mating claim. It's a pack recognition ceremony. The Alpha formally acknowledges a pack member's blood right. It's been done for heirs, for returning exiles, for wolves joining through marriage." He paused. "It can be purely political." "Can be," she said. "Yes," he said. Something in his jaw tightened. "I am trying very hard to give you options, Naya. I am trying very hard not to use the bond as leverage. I know what I feel. I know what my wolf tells me every moment you're within 50 meters, and I am choosing to give you room because you deserve room, and because anything less than your full choice means nothing to me." She looked at him for a long time. The amber eyes, the jaw, the shoulders that carried 300 miles of land and 400 wolves and 11 years of doing it alone. The man who sent a 4-word message and waited, and had met her on a dark path and not pushed, and had sat across a kitchen table and told her the truth when a lie would have been easier. She reached out and put her hand on his jaw. He went absolutely still, not frozen, present, every cell of him attending to the point of contact with an intensity that had nothing controlled about it, that was pure wolf and pure man simultaneously, and was the most honest thing she'd ever felt from another person. "I am not easy," she said again, because it was still true, and he needed to keep knowing it. "I know," he said, barely a sound. "And I am not choosing this because of the bond, or the politics, or the pack, or the land." Her thumb moved across his jaw, slight and deliberate. "I am choosing it because you have been honest with me at every point when dishonesty would have served you better, and I have no framework for what to do with that, except this." She kissed him. It was not gentle. It was 28 years of being between two worlds and finally landing in one, fierce and direct and without apology. And he met it with something equally fierce, his hands coming to her face with a care that was at odds with the intensity, holding her like something that mattered and always mattered and simply had been lost for a long time and was now found. The meadow was very quiet around them. In the distance, impossibly, A wolf howled, and then another, and then the whole pack, rolling across the territory like a wave, a sound that had no human translation, but that Naya felt in her blood, both of it, as something that meant, yes, finally, this. She pulled back enough to look at him. "The pack knows," she said. "The pack always knows," he said, and the corner of his mouth had finally, fully moved, not an almost smile, not a shift, a real one, rare and complete and entirely for her. "I'm still furious about how fast this happened," she said. "I know," he said, with the smile still there. "I've been furious about it for 2 weeks." Chapter 8. The Half-Blood Stands. The formal claiming ceremony happened at the next full moon. 14 days. She used every one of them. She spent the first week learning the pack, not as a political exercise, not as strategy, but as a person learning people. She learned names and lineages and the specific texture of 400 individual lives. She worked 3 days in the pack's infirmary alongside their healer, a gentle wolf named Ocean, who wept quietly when she demonstrated a technique he'd been trying to learn from a medical journal for 6 months. She sat with the elders who supported the merger, and she did not argue with them. She listened, and she asked questions, and she watched 2 of the 7 shift their position, not because she persuaded them, but because she made them feel heard. She spent the second week with the half-blood wolves, Sable, Tam, Dex, Ren, Lyra, and small, fierce Kala, who was only 14 and had a stare that could stop weather, and they spent the morning in the east sitting room doing something that was not quite a pack meeting and not quite a family breakfast, and was, Naya realized slowly, something she had no word for because she had never had it before: belonging. Not the performed kind, not the desperate negotiated kind she'd spent her life trying to cobble together from scraps. The quiet, unremarkable, entirely natural kind. The kind where Tam could hand her a cup of tea without asking how she took it because he'd noticed 3 mornings ago and remembered, and where Kala could lean against her arm while she read without either of them acknowledging it, and where nobody in the room required her to be less than what she was or more than what she was. She excused herself at noon because she needed to be alone with what was happening to her internal landscape. She went to the eastern meadow. She sat in the tall grass and she let herself feel it, all of it, the things she'd been managing and containing and keeping at arm's length since she crossed the border. The land, the pack, the half-blood children who had looked at her like she was proof that there was somewhere they could be whole, and Riven. She sat with Riven last because he was the most significant and the most dangerous to examine honestly. The fated bond. She knew what it was. Her mother's wolf contact had explained it years ago, in theory, as something that happened to other wolves, relevant to Naya only academically, because who would bond a half-blood? The recognition, the pull, the biological and spiritual certainty that this specific person was built to be your person, in the same way that your lungs were built to take oxygen. She had been fighting it for 5 days, and she was exhausted, and the wolf half of her was deeply unimpressed with the effort. She heard him cross the meadow. She didn't turn around. "The pack says you've been out here for 2 hours," he said. "The pack has opinions," she said. He came to sit beside her in the grass, not close enough to crowd, close enough that she was aware of every inch of the distance between them. "Corin will come back," he said, with a different approach. "I know. He'll try to discredit my bloodline claim. He'll argue the half-blood inheritance isn't valid under current law, even if it was under the Accords. He'll look for procedural grounds." She paused. "We need to get the pack recognition formalized, publicly, on record. It removes the ambiguity. That would require..." Chapter 8. The Claiming. The full moon rose over Ironvale territory like it had been waiting. 400 wolves assembled in the great clearing at the center of the forest, the ceremonial ground, ancient and worn smooth by centuries of pack gatherings, ringed by trees that were old enough to have witnessed the founding. Naya stood at the edge of the clearing and felt them, all 400, their combined presence a physical thing, warm and overwhelming, and entirely unlike anything her human half had a word for. She was wearing her own clothes again, dark, clean, entirely herself. Sable had braided 3 small sections of her hair back from her face in the old pack style. "You don't have to," Sable had said, and Naya had held still and let her. Riven stood at the center of the clearing. He was in the ceremonial coat, old dark leather, worn soft, the iron veil mark at the collar, and he was standing with the specific quality of stillness she'd come to understand was not calm, but choice. Everything contained, everything present, every ounce of his attention in this moment. He looked at her across the clearing, the amber eyes, the full moon above him, the 400 wolves between them and around them, and the ancient trees at the edge. She walked forward. The pack parted for her, not because they were told to, not in the formal, organized way of ceremony, but instinctively, fluidly, the way wolves moved for something that belonged. She felt it, the shift in collective energy as she moved through them, the subtle turning of bodies, the frequency of the pack adjusting like an instrument finding its note. She reached the center. Riven held out his hand. She took it. Marin's voice was steady as she began the old words, the recognition ceremony, 300 years old, spoken in the old wolf tongue that Naya understood imperfectly and completely simultaneously, the half of her that was wolf receiving it like water after years of drought. At the moment of formal recognition, Riven spoke her lineage aloud. Dale Solis, his father before him, the founding line traced back to the first alpha of Ironvale. And when her name was added to it, spoken in Riven's voice into the full moon night, Naya felt something happen. Not magic, not mystical in any way she didn't have biology for, just completion, the feeling of a door that had been stuck for 28 years, opening without resistance. The pack made a sound. She had heard it 3 times now, that resonant collective sound, the wolf language that had no human translation. This time it was full and rising and went on until it became a howl, all 400 voices rising into the full moon sky over Ironvale territory. Naya tipped her head back and howled with them. Her voice, half-blood, both registers, human tone and wolf tone simultaneously, something no pure wolf could make and no pure human could make, something that was only possible in the space between. She heard Sable's voice find her in the chorus, and the other half-blood voices, and Riven's beside her, deep and absolute and certain. When it ended, the forest was very quiet. Riven held both her hands. He was looking at her with the full, unguarded version of his face, the alpha composure set aside, just the man who had been alone for 11 years and sent 4 words to a half-blood woman in a city 8 hours away because his wolf had found what it was looking for in an archive. "Welcome home," he said. She had heard those words before. In his message 4 weeks ago, they had pulled at something in her she didn't want examined. Now she knew what it was. "Home," she said, and meant it completely. Chapter 9. What Corin Did Next. She moved fast. She'd expected that. 3 days after the ceremony, Corin filed a formal territorial claim with the Northern Council, a challenge to the Ironvale founding line recognition, citing the half-blood status as grounds for invalidation. It was aggressive and legally thin, and they both knew it, and Corin knew they knew it, which meant it wasn't designed to win. It was designed to delay, to create uncertainty,
to make Ironvale's political position look unstable enough that the wolves who were still uncommitted on the merger question would recalculate. He wants the council elders to feel that the legal ground is shifting, Naya said. She was at the long table in the archive room, surrounded by documents, which had become her natural habitat in a way that Marin found privately hilarious. If 3 of the 7 elders request a council review of the recognition ceremony, it pauses the legal effect of the ceremony while the review is pending. Can he get 3? Riven asked. She already has 2. Aldrich and Pren were in the room when Corin visited. Their body language was pre-negotiated. The 3rd. Elder Voss, she said. She's not committed to either position. She's pragmatic. She'll go where she thinks Ironvale's survival lies. Naya looked up. Which means she needs to believe Ironvale survives stronger with the founding line than merged into Valdris. She's been asking to meet you, Marin said from the doorway, with the tone of someone who had been holding this information for the right moment. Then let's meet, Naya said. Elder Voss was 70, wolf gold eyes gone almost white with age, and she had the specific quality of presence that came from watching everything and being surprised by very little. She sat across from Naya in the small council anteroom and studied her for a full silent minute before speaking. Your father left this territory when I was 40. I voted against the ruling that expelled him. I was outvoted. Naya said nothing. He was a good wolf, loyal. The council was wrong. She folded her hands. I have been trying to honor that wrongness ever since by being less wrong, sometimes successfully. What do you need from me? Naya asked. Nothing, Voss said. I needed to look at you, to know whether you're here for this territory or for what this territory can give you. Those aren't mutually exclusive, Naya said. No, but the weight is different. Naya held the old wolf's white gold gaze. There are 6 half-blood wolves in this pack. They have been pack members in law for 40 years and in practice for almost none of that time. The pack healer has been trying to learn half-blood shift management from a journal because no one has built the knowledge base. The infirmary is understaffed. The archive is organized by someone who retired 15 years ago and took the organizational logic with them. She paused. I have been here 4 weeks. Those are not observations of someone who plans to leave. Voss was quiet for a moment. No, they're not. She did not call for a review. Corin's challenge stalled with 2 elder signatures instead of 3. The Northern Council Secretary, who Naya had been corresponding with now for 3 weeks and had developed a productive professional relationship with, responded to Corin's filing with a request for additional documentation that would, at minimum, take 4 months to compile. 4 months was a long time. A lot could be built in 4 months.
Chapter 10. What Gets Built. She called her patients in Verith City and referred them to colleagues she trusted. She went back once for a week to close down the apartment. Decimal, the cat, watched her pack boxes with the expression of a creature who had opinions and had decided expressing them was beneath his dignity. She brought Decimal back to Ironvale. Riven's face when she arrived with a cat carrier was something she would keep for the rest of her life. He's a cat, he said. He is Decimal and he is non-negotiable, she said. Decimal surveyed the estate with the authority of a small creature who had decided this was an acceptable arrangement, chose a chair in the archive room as his primary residence, and within 2 weeks was being carried around by Calla and tolerated it. Her mother came in November. Riven met her at the door, and Naya watched him look at the small, fierce woman who had spent 30 years adapting to things she hadn't signed up for, and 3 decades furious at a man she loved who hadn't told her the truth, and she watched her mother look at Riven with the specific maternal assessment that had never failed to read people accurately. "You're the alpha," her mother said. "Yes," Riven said. "You sent my daughter 4 words on a black piece of paper and expected her to drive 8 hours. She came," he said.
She's stubborn enough to come precisely because you expected her not to need more convincing, her mother said. That's not a compliment to your communication style. She stepped past him into the house. You can tell me about my late husband now. Don't leave anything out. Riven told her everything. They sat in the kitchen, the eternal kitchen, warm and permanent and smelling of wood smoke and Marin's cooking, and he told her every record in the archive about Dale Solus, the wolf her mother had loved and lost and never fully known. He told her with directness and without managing the difficulty of it, which was the right choice, and Naya watched her mother receive it with the particular grief of someone who had been waiting a very long time for information they deserved. Afterward, her mother sat quietly for a moment. Then she looked at Naya. "This is where you're supposed to be," she said, not as a question. "Yes," Naya said. "Then I'm glad you came." She looked at Riven. "Take care of my daughter." "She takes care of herself," Riven said. "I just make sure she has somewhere worth being." Her mother studied him for a long moment. "Good answer," she said. The months built on each other. The Half-Blood program became a formal pack initiative. Naya worked with Ocean to document every technique, every approach, the full body of knowledge she'd accumulated over 16 years of managing a half-blood biology in a world designed for pure versions of either kind. And they turned it into a curriculum, and 3 wolves from other packs requested copies before it was even finished. And Naya spent 2 weeks corresponding with half-blood wolves across the Northern Territory who had never had anyone explain what they were in terms that made sense. The Northern Council ruled on Corin's challenge in the spring, dismissed, insufficient grounds. The Iron Veil founding line recognition stood. Corin sent a letter of formal withdrawal from the merger proposal. It was signed with his full title and contained between its lines the specific flavor of a man who had decided to find a different target. The day the letter arrived, Riven found Naya in the meadow, their meadow, the eastern one. It had become this without either of them naming it, and she was standing in the tall spring grass, looking at the territory with an expression he had learned to read as contentment so unfamiliar she was still slightly suspicious of it. He stood beside her. "It's done," he said. "This part, there'll be another Corin eventually." "Yes," he said, "but not today." She turned to look at him, the amber eyes in spring light, the face that had been guarded when she arrived and was not guarded now, not with her, not ever with her. She had discovered that she was the only person who got the full unmasked version, and she treated that as the valuable thing it was. "I want to make it formal," she said, "the bond." He went very still. "You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I am choosing to. There's a difference, and you know it, and I need you to receive this correctly." She held his gaze. "I am not easy, and I have not become easy. I am still 28 years of hard edges, and I will challenge you and disagree with you, and there will be days when my wolf and my human half are fighting each other, and I will not be graceful about it." "I know," he said. "And I am choosing you anyway," she said. "All of it, the territory, the pack, the politics, the cat who has decided your favorite chair is his. I am choosing it because it is mine, and because you are—" She stopped. "What?" he said. "You are the first person," she said, and her voice had gone very quiet. "The exact thing I am, both halves, all the complication, and did not want me to be less of any of it." He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear with the absolute carefulness of someone who had waited a very long time for something they wanted. "You are the most extraordinary thing in 300 miles, he said. "You have been that before you crossed the border. Everything I've seen since has only been confirmation." She kissed him in the spring meadow with the full moon rising early in the evening sky and the pack somewhere behind them going about the ordinary business of being alive, and it was fierce and certain and without a single apology between them. This time no one howled. The silence was its own acknowledgement, the particular quiet of something that had always been true, finally being said out loud.
Epilogue.
1 year after the border stone. The archive room smelled like old paper and cat. Decimal was in his chair. Naya was at the long table with 3 open documents and a cup of tea that had gone cold an hour ago, which was normal. Sable was cross-legged on the floor with her own stack of papers, which had become normal too. Sable had officially started studying pack law 3 months ago, with the specific intensity of someone who had decided they were going to be very good at something the world hadn't expected of them. Article 14, Sable said, without looking up, Subclause 3. Covers territorial inheritance through the maternal line, Naya said, also without looking up. Ratified 1923, amended 1967. The amendment expanded the definition of maternal. Ask me why. Why? Because in 1965, an alpha tried to contest his daughter's claim on the grounds that she'd been raised by her human mother rather than the pack. The Northern Council told him to sit down. I love the Northern Council, Sable said. They're imperfect and slow and occasionally baffling, Naya said, but yes. The door opened. Riven leaned in the doorframe in the particular way he had, not filling it aggressively, just occupying it completely, and looked at the archive room with an expression Naya could now read in full. Affection for the chaos, attention on her, something warm underneath both. The Eastern Pack family is here for the monthly check-in. Ocean wants you for the half-blood consult when you're ready. 20 minutes, she said. He didn't move. What? She said. Your mother called, he said. She's coming for the winter solstice gathering. She wants to know if she can bring Gerald. Naya looked up. Who is Gerald? Apparently a man she met at the Northern Pack Cultural Archive event last month, Riven said, with the expression of a man delivering news he found equally surprising. She described him as a retired cartographer with excellent opinions on tea. She said to tell you, and this is a direct quote, that it turns out 30 years of being angry at one man was using up energy she could have been spending on better men. Naya stared at him. Then she laughed, fully, genuinely, the laugh that she'd discovered in the last year she was capable of, the one that came from somewhere that had been closed for a very long time and decided open was better. Sable looked between them with the expression of someone watching something she intended to remember. Tell her Gerald is welcome. Tell her we'll put him in the East guest room and warn him about Decimal. Done, Riven said. He didn't move. What else? She said. Nothing else, he said. He stopped. She looked at him. The amber eyes. The man who sent 4 words and waited. The alpha who called her home to a place she'd never been and turned out to be right about it. You just wanted to see me, she said. Yes, he said, without embarrassment, without performance, just the simple truth of it. Sable made a soft sound that she would later deny was anything sentimental. Naya stood up, crossed to the doorway, stood on her toes, still not enough to be level with him, he was deeply unreasonably tall, and kissed him once, brief and certain. 20 minutes, she said against his mouth. 20 minutes, he agreed. She went back to the table, he went back to his territory. Between them, in the space that had once been the distance between 2 worlds and now just home, Iron Veil carried on. 400 wolves and 6 half-blood wolves, and a retired cartographer named Gerald, and a cat with opinions on furniture. All of it ordinary and extraordinary, and entirely, completely real. Naya Solis, half-blood heir of Iron Veil, put her cold tea down and picked up her pen and thought, I am going to be furious about how right this is for the rest of my life. She found she didn't mind at all.
Thank you for listening to Moonbound Chronicles, Between Two Moons, a complete werewolf romance audiobook. If this story moved you, subscribe, comment, and share with someone who deserves a good love story.
New stories drop every week on Moonbound Chronicles.